Bienvenidos al canal de YouTube de Ediciones Radio. Aquí encontrarás vídeos especializados en cada tema. Si te gusta nuestro contenido, no olvides suscribirte, darle a me gusta y comentar tu experiencia. Gracias por elegirnos en tu camino hacia el éxito.
Recuerda que todos nuestros temarios también están disponibles en formato digital y papel. Para cualquier duda puedes escribirnos a info@edicionesradio.com. Cuerpo de Maestros. Inglés. Volumen 2.
Main ideas. Introduction. This topic tries to explain how games contribute to the development of creativity and imagination in teaching English as a foreign language, what types of games should be played in English classes, and what types of techniques are most appropriate. Without a doubt, games are one of the most valuable resources that can be used in English classes, as they can be fun as well as an effective way to develop communicative competence. Games are an interesting tool since it can integrate all linguistic skills, speaking, listening, reading, and writing, following the common European framework for languages recommendations. It is very important for pupils to feel motivated, and one of the best ways to feel so is to let them have a good time. The important aspect is that games in the language learning process should not be played just for the sake of playing, but the teacher should always keep in mind that the game is played to practice or review some aspects taught before, and to acquire all the key competences, especially the competence in cultural awareness and expression and personal, social, and learning to learn competence, which are reflected in the Crown Decree 157/2022 of March 1, which establishes the Basic Curriculum of Primary Education, Article 9. In all curricula, importance is given to the recreational and cultural aspects of language learning. In the mentioned Crown Decree 157/2022, Annex 2, in the specific Competence 6, for the foreign language area, it highlights the following: appreciate and respect linguistic, cultural, and artistic diversity from the foreign language, identifying and valuing the differences and similarities between languages and cultures in order to learn to manage intercultural situations. In addition, it is essential to mention that the games are a very useful didactic tool to address the differences in the way each student accesses learning, since there are a wide variety of amused activities. That is why we recommend to follow the Universal Design for Learning (UDL) principles, which refer to the possibility that students acquire knowledge and skills through different ways. The principles of the UDL are included in the Organic Law 3/2020, BO of 29th December 2020, henceforth LOMLOE, amending the Organic Law of Education 2006. In its Article 5 General Principles, Section 4, the following is mentioned: the organizational, methodological, and curricular measures adopted for this purpose will be governed by the principles of Universal Design for Learning. 1. Functions of games and creativity in foreign language learning. In the first place, it might be necessary to try to define the term creativity. Creativity, or creativeness, is a mental process involving the generation of new ideas or concepts, or new associations between existing ideas or concepts. From a scientific point of view, the products of creative thought are usually considered to have both originality and appropriateness. An alternative, more everyday conception of creativity is that it is simply the act of making something new. Although a simple phenomenon, it is quite complex. Unlike many phenomena in science, there is no single authoritative perspective or definition of creativity. Unlike many phenomena in psychology, there is no standardized measurement technique. Creativity has been attributed variously to divine intervention, cognitive processes, the social environment, personality, and chance. It has been associated with genius, mental illness, and humor. Some say it is a trait we are born with. Others say it can be taught with the application of simple techniques. Generally, most creativity techniques use associations between the goal or the problem, the current state, which may be an imperfect solution to the problem, and some stimulus, possibly selected randomly. There is an analogy between many creativity techniques and methods of evolutionary computation, a subfield of artificial intelligence. In problem-solving contexts, the random word creativity technique is perhaps the simplest method. A person confronted with a problem is presented with a randomly generated word, in the hopes of a solution arising from any associations between the word and the problem. A random image, sound, or article can be used instead of a random word as a kind of creativity provocation. All known creative techniques can be categorized depending on the methods and means utilized. Randomization, brainstorming. Focusing techniques, morphological analysis, attribute listing. Evolutionary directed techniques, HBGA, a human-based genetic algorithm, allows humans to contribute their innovative solutions to the evolutionary process. Knowledge-based techniques, relevant to the keywords that you use. Conceptual blending techniques. According to this theory, elements and vital relations from diverse scenarios are blended in a subconscious process known as conceptual blending, which is assumed to be ubiquitous to everyday thought and language. Insights obtained from these blends constitute the products of creative thinking. When learning a language, effort is required at every moment and must be maintained over a long period of time. Games help and encourage many learners to sustain their interest and work. They also help the teacher to create contexts in which the language is useful and meaningful. The learners want to take part, and in order to do so must understand what others are saying or have written, and they must speak or write in order to express their own point of view or give information. The need for meaningfulness in language learning has been accepted for some years. A useful interpretation of meaningfulness is that the learners respond to the content in a definite way. If they are amused, angered, intrigued, or surprised, the content is clearly meaningful to them. Thus, the meaning of the language they listen to, read, speak, and write will be more vividly experienced and therefore better remembered. There are many advantages of using games in the classroom. 1. Games are a welcome break from the usual routine of the language class. 2. They are motivating and challenging. 3. Learning a language requires a great deal of effort. Games help students to make and sustain the effort of learning. 4. Games provide language practice in the various skills speaking, writing, listening, and reading. 5. They encourage students to interact and communicate. 6. They create a meaningful context for language use. It has been argued that games are not just time-filling activities, but have a great educational value. Most language games make learners use the language instead of thinking about learning the correct forms. Games can lower anxiety, thus make the acquisition of input easy. They can give shy students more opportunity to express their opinions and feelings, and add diversion to the regular classroom activities. They are a good way of practicing language, for they provide a model of what learners will use the language for in real life in the future. Games encourage, entertain, teach, and promote fluency. In a first place, games can be used as short warm-up activities, or when there is some time left at the end of a lesson. Nevertheless, they may be used at all stages of the lesson, provided that they are suitable and carefully chosen. They can be used at the end or beginning of a lesson as revision exercises, helping learners recall material. Let us now reflect on games and vocabulary learning. First, as games bring in relaxation and fun for students, they help them learn and retain new words more easily. Second, games usually involve friendly competition and they keep learners interested. Therefore, the important role of games in teaching and learning vocabulary cannot be denied. However, in order to achieve the most from vocabulary games, it is essential that suitable games are chosen. Whenever a game is to be conducted, the number of students, proficiency level, cultural context, timing, topic, and the classroom organization are factors that must be taken into account. 2. Definition and classification of games for language learning and perfection. In general, a game is a universal form of recreation, generally including any activity engaged in for diversion or amusement, and often establishing a situation that involves a contest or rivalry. As far as children are concerned, games refer to any of the amusements and pastimes of children that may involve spontaneous, unstructured activity, based mostly on fantasy and imagination, or organized games with set rules. Many games are derived from everyday life and reflect the culture from which they developed. There are a great number of language games. It is necessary to decide which game to use in a particular class, and which games will be most appropriate and most successful with each group of students. There are some factors to be taken into consideration. Teachers should first consider the level of the game to fit their students' language level. They should choose the game that fits the purposes of that class, the aims and the content. Moreover, teachers should consider students' characteristics, whether they are old or young, and highly motivated to learn or not. You must think about when the game should be used, because there is a big difference between using the game early in the morning or at the end of the school day, on Monday or Friday. In addition to the factors mentioned, students should feel comfortable and want to join the activity, as games are mainly used to motivate pupils and to make them use the language. It is quite difficult to find a game that meets all of the requirements. Some games must be adapted in order to fit students' language level, natures, and characteristics. The most important factor is that games should be used when they can give students both fun and educational meaning, otherwise they will be a waste of time. According to Richard Amato, 2009, even though games are often associated with fun, their pedagogical values should be of importance, particularly in second language teaching. Moreover, as Avedon states, students try harder at games than in other tasks. Naturally, when playing games, students are trying to win or to beat other teams for themselves or on the behalf of their team. They are so competitive while playing because they want to have a turn to play, to score points and to win. In the class, students will definitely participate in the activities. Therefore, it is possible for a teacher to make students practice new grammar, vocabulary, and so on. It can be clearly seen that games can capture students' attention and participation. They can motivate students to want to learn more. Moreover, by using games, a boring class can be transformed into a challenging one. There is a high level of stress in the classroom because students have to face unfamiliar or unknown grammatical structures, words, texts, and so on. Therefore, students often feel uncomfortable and insecure in class, which inevitably affects their ability to learn. During games, students want to communicate efficiently. They do not worry about making mistakes and do not try to correct themselves in every single sentence. When students are free from worry and stress, they can improve their fluency and natural speaking styles. Next, according to Schultz, students learn without realizing that they are learning when playing games. To answer quickly, students do not worry too much about grammar mistakes because they want to communicate and to explain themselves. Apart from having fun, students do not worry about errors and punishment. Moreover, they will learn a grammatical rule and have a chance to use it. Thus, they learn unconsciously. They stop thinking about language and begin using it in a spontaneous and natural manner within the classroom. Another advantage is increasing students' proficiency. Playing games in the classroom can enormously increase students' ability in using language, because students have a chance to use language with a purpose in the situations provided. Hadfield states that games provide as much concentrated practice as a traditional drill without provoking boredom. Besides, they provide an opportunity for real communication within artificially defined limits. For these reasons, games constitute a bridge between the classroom and the real world. It is necessary for those who want to use games as a learning aid to be concerned about when to use them. Games may be regarded an integral part of the unit and lesson plans, not an entertaining activity for Friday mornings or for the end of the term. Games can contribute to the development of the students' skills if they are incorporated into the classroom, particularly if they are used to reinforce or introduce a grammatical rules or structures and vocabulary. Thus, it may be quite a good idea to incorporate games in daily classes. For example, if the teacher is going to introduce present tenses instead of teaching them in a traditional way, by simply telling them the rules, have them do some written exercises, drilling and answering questions, teachers may help students understand these forms of grammar by playing games, which can also meet all the requirements of the traditional classes involving learning rules, drilling and repeating. Moreover, students can take this opportunity to use them in real communication. However, even though games sometimes do not work since students have different learning styles and preferences, and some other factors such as being used in an inappropriate time, the nature of games themselves, and even the nature of teachers, it is still worth trying to use them in class because they offer several good advantages to students. After this general introduction and definition of games, we are going to present a classification of games. This classification is mainly based on publications by Andrew Wright. Among all the games he proposes in his publications, we have only chosen those types which seem to be more appropriate for primary education. 2.1. Icebreakers and warmers. These games are mainly useful at the beginning of the term, so that pupils have the chance to get to know each other and at the same time they practice English. For younger students, we can propose games to practice questions and answers, for example. Catch the ball. Student A has a ball and while throwing the ball, he asks, "What's your name?" Student B who catches the ball will answer, "My name is Sandra." Then the ball will be thrown to a third student, who will be asked a different question. The students who cannot answer correctly will be out. For elder pupils, we can use games like Find Someone Who. To play this game, you will need to prepare handouts like the following one. Students use the checklist as they walk around the room, trying to find a person who has the characteristics asked for. When students find someone who is bad at maths, e.g., they write that person's name on their checklist of paper, and move on to the next person with the hope that that person meets one of the other characteristics on the master list. The goal is to meet and talk to as many people as possible within the time limit, in order to put one name by each of the characteristics. 2.2. Mainly speaking. There are many games which focus on skills. It is usually difficult to find a game which focuses on one skill only. That is why in the classification the different groups are called mainly speaking, for example. When using the games in this group, we practice the speaking skill, although the others, reading, listening and writing, may be included too. Example 1, Identity Picture Game. This is a guessing game. The teacher, or one of the pupils, shows a photo to the class. This photo is covered with a sheet of paper, so that the pupils cannot see the image. They have to try to guess who or what is in the photo by asking questions or simply naming people or things. The teacher will reveal the photo step by step. The first pupil to guess correctly will be the teacher in the next game. Example 2, Picture Dictation. Students play in pairs. Each student has a picture, maybe drawn by him herself or a handout, and has to describe it to the partner who will have to draw following his/her partner's instructions. Once they finished, they will compare both pictures and then change roles. Example 3, Match. Matching games are an excellent and fun way to practice vocabulary. In each game, the pupils have to find a matching pair that is two words that correspond with each other. In matching opposites, for example, they have to find two words that have opposite meanings, e.g., good and bad. Example 4, Remember. These games are an excellent way to review vocabulary. The students will be shown, for example, a street scene for 3 minutes, and then they will have to say all the items they can remember. The teacher will write the items on the board. So as to assure that all pupils can see the picture, we might use the digital board. 2.3. Mainly listening. Example 1, Simon says. This is probably one of the most traditional games for practicing listening comprehension and imperatives. One person is chosen to be Simon. At the beginning it might be advisable for the teacher herself to be Simon. The others stand in a line. The Simon then calls out an action for the children to follow. It can be anything like touch your toes, jump on one foot. Simon, when giving an action, can simply state the action by itself. Touch your ears, and whoever does it is out and has to sit down. Or Simon can say, Simon says, touch your ears, and then everyone must follow the instruction. The actions can be varied according to the age group of children you are playing with. The last person who is standing can then be Simon the next time. Example 2, the same or different. Sound game. This game is played by using minimal pairs. The students will have a list like the following, without the last column of course. Minimal pair. The same. Different. Words heard. Number 1. You. Anne Owen. Number 2. You. Fall o fail. Number 3. You. Free o fry. Number 4. You. Buy o buy. They will listen to the minimal pairs on the CD player and decide if they hear the same words or different ones. It might be necessary for them to listen more than once. Example 3. Bingo definitions. Bingo is another traditional game. It can be used for many skills, functions, and many items can be reviewed by using it. If we play bingo definitions, we will read definitions to our students, and they will have to cross out the correct words on their bingo grid. The one who first completes a line or the whole bingo card is the winner. Sample bingo card. Bed. Table. Desk. Lamp. Chair. Bookcase. Mirror. Armchair. Sofa. The example chosen is about furniture. The following are the definitions the teacher will use. You sleep in it bed. You sit on it chair. You turn it on when it is getting dark, lamp. 2.4. Mainly writing. Example 1. True and false definitions and descriptions. Each student has to write 5 e.g. sentences in his/her notebook. Some of them are true, others not. Then some students will have to read their sentences aloud, and the rest of the class has to decide whether the statement is true or false. Example 2. Create an island. First, the pupils will have to write a description of an imaginary island. This is a good chance to practice vocabulary related to countryside, place names, prepositions, etc. Once they have finished, they can pass their text on to the next classmate, who will draw the island described. Later, the description and the picture will be compared to check comprehension, student 2, and expression, student 1. 2.5. Mainly reading. Example, jumbled texts. The students will read paragraphs, easy variation, or sentences, more difficult variation, which make a story. They have to order the sentences or paragraphs to make a convincing story. In many cases, there will be more than one correct answer for this game. The teacher should choose the most interesting or creative story to be the winner. 2.6. Mainly vocabulary and spelling. Example 1. Touch and describe. The teacher will put realia, toys, and other small objects in a bag. One student comes to the front of the class, puts his/her hand into a bag, touches one of the objects, describes it, and then says its name. If he is given the correct answer, he will get a point. The rest of the class can also try and guess the name by listening to their classmate's description. Example 2. I spy with my little eye. The objectives of this game are to describe common objects, to increase sensory perception, and to verbalize sensory detail. It can be played with groups of more or less 4 to 24 pupils. You need no time to prepare this game, and it should not last more than 5 to 15 minutes. The game can be played at all primary levels as soon as they have some vocabulary knowledge. The vocabulary we will practice will be related above all to classroom objects, colors, shapes, and size. Choose one student to be the spy. The spy looks around the room and selects an object which he then whispers to the teacher. He then announces to the class, I spy with my little eye something color. Students then take turns guessing which object the spy has seen. I.e., is it the teacher's shirt? Whoever guesses correctly becomes the next spy. Example 3. Mime and guess. One student simply acts out some activity, e.g. cooking, and the other students guess what that student is doing. The student who guesses correctly acts out another activity. Example 4. Odd one out. This simple activity practices vocabulary and, to some extent, speaking. Make a list of 4 or 5 words, all but one of which have something in common. Ask the students to find the odd one out. If they are in stages 5 or 6, they may be asked to justify their choice. For example, dog, cat, donkey, dragon. The answer could be dragon because it is the only mythical creature, or cat, because all the other words start with D. Example 5. Adjective dominoes. This game can be used for the introduction or review of adjectives and their opposites. First, you need a sheet of blank paper and make equal-sized rectangular domino cards. To do so, you draw a line down the middle, across the width, not the length, of each card. Then you cut and paste adjective pictures and write the word, or just write the adjective, on one half of the domino cards. If you photocopy them, you have at least 2 sets. Now you write a random adjective on the other end of the card. This adjective must match the picture end of one of the other cards. At the end, you should have a large set of cards with pictures on one end, and random adjectives matching the picture ends of other cards. To play the game, you deal 5 cards to each person. They need not hide their cards. The teacher puts one card out in the middle of the table. The first player tries to match one of his/her 5 card ends to the end or side of the domino on the playfield. If they succeed, their turn is over and is passed to the next person. The next player can play off the first person's card or the original card. If a player cannot make a match, they pass their turn and draw an additional card. The first one out of cards wins. Example 6, I'm going to the supermarket, memory game. With the help of this game, you practice skills like naming food items, listing items in alphabetical order, identifying initial sounds, or recalling items in a series. It can be played with groups from 2 to 25 pupils. You need no preparation, and the game usually lasts some 5 to 15 minutes. It can be played at all primary levels. The teacher chooses a student to begin. This student will say, I'm going to the supermarket to buy food item beginning with E. If you play the game with younger pupils, they can say words beginning with any letter. The next student will then say, I'm going to the supermarket to buy food item beginning with E named by first student and food item beginning with B. The game continues, with each student recalling all previously mentioned items and adding another item in alphabetical sequence. If a student misses an item or cannot think of an item to add, he or she is out. The last remaining student wins. 2.7. Mainly grammar. Example 1. Online game to practice prepositions. The students have to complete sentences with prepositions. They can get 3, 2, or 1 point per sentence, according to its difficulty. For example, -1 point sentence, we listen music after school. To at with. -2 point sentence, Wednesday I have to clean my house. At in, on. -3 point sentence, get the elevator and go to the 5th floor. Nothing, through to by on. Once they have answered correctly, by clicking on the preposition, they can throw the ball and get points. If they have not clicked on the correct preposition, they may also throw the ball, but they will not get any points. Example 2. Riddles. A riddle is a question with an amusing answer. In the first place, we will hand out a riddle or do one online. http://www.wordmania.org. To practice grammar, in this case question formation, the students will play in groups and write their own riddles to hand them over to other groups once they have finished. It is impossible to mention all the existing language games in this topic. We have only tried to explain some examples. 3. Games is a creative and recreational technique to achieve communicative competence in the foreign language. In the succeeding, we are going to consider the reasons why games serve as excellent communicative activities. The use of games can be a powerful language learning tool. The aim of all language games is for students to use the language. However, during games, learners also use the target language to persuade and negotiate their way to desired results. This process involves the productive and receptive skills simultaneously. Some interesting games and their application in the language classroom to achieve communicative competence will be presented later. In recent years, language researchers and professionals have shifted their focus from developing individual linguistic skills to the use of language to achieve the speaker's objectives. This new area of focus, known as communicative competence, leads language teachers to seek task-oriented activities that engage their students in creative language use. Games offer students a fun-filled and relaxing learning atmosphere. After learning and practicing new language items, students have the opportunity to use language in a non-stressful way. Uberman 1998. While playing games, the learner's attention is on the message, not on the language. In a game-oriented context, anxiety is reduced and speech fluency is generated, thus communicative competence is achieved. Games introduce an element of competition into language-building activities. The competitive atmosphere also makes learners concentrate and think intensively during the learning process, what fosters unconscious acquisition of inputs. Most students who have experienced game-oriented activities hold positive attitudes towards them because they like the relaxed atmosphere, the competitiveness, and the motivation that games bring to the classroom. The benefits of using games in language learning can be summed up as in the following. Games are learner-centered. Promote communicative competence. Create a meaningful context for language use. Increase learning motivation. Reduce learning anxiety. Encourage creative and spontaneous use of language. Construct a cooperative learning environment, and foster participatory attitudes of the students. At primary level, games can be used, among others, to practice the following communicative functions. Stating facts. Hollow right pointing triangle naming and identifying people, things and actions. Hollow right pointing triangle describing things, people and actions. Hollow right pointing triangle comparing things. Hollow right pointing triangle commentating. Stating opinions and feelings. Hollow right pointing triangle agreement and disagreement. Hollow right pointing triangle doubt. Hollow right pointing triangle ignorance. Hollow right pointing triangle personal attitudes. Hollow right pointing triangle pleasure. Asking questions. Hollow right pointing triangle questions of fact. Hollow right pointing triangle questions about others' opinions and feelings. 3.1 Examples of communicative games. 1. Two truths and a lie. Object of the game, guess which of the three facts is the lie. Outline, everyone comes up with two truths about themselves and one lie. The others have to guess what the lie is. Example, the three things I could say about myself are, I have been to Africa. I am allergic to horses. And I am one of 11 children. The pupils guess which of the three is not true. Then, when everyone has made their choice, the teacher, or later the pupil, reveals the lie. The lie is I am allergic to horses. 2. 20 questions. Object of the game, guess the person, place or thing in 20 questions or less. Game type, little or no movement is required. Rules, one player is it and thinks of a person, place or thing. The rest of the players must guess the person, place or thing in 20 questions or less. All questions must be yes or no questions. Questions should be asked by players in a specified order, e.g. player 1 question 1, player 2 question 2, etc. You can only guess at what the person, place or thing is if it is your turn. So player 1 should guess first, and then if wrong, go ahead and ask the next question. Then player 2 should guess if he wants to, and then ask their question, etc. If a player guesses the object, they become it for the next game. 3. Bad fruit, a shopper's nightmare. Level, easy to medium. This is an oral communication activity, especially appropriate for EFL learners at primary level. This game is designed for practicing shopping dialogues and vocabulary. Object of the game, to accumulate as many products as possible. Students are divided into clerks and shoppers. The clerks set up stands to allow easy access for all shoppers, e.g. around the outsides of the room with their backs to the wall. The shoppers are given a set amount of money, e.g. dollars, pounds, etc., and begin at a stand where there is an open space. It is recommended giving students as much money as possible, since students who run out can no longer participate. Students shop, trying to accumulate as many items as possible. Each item is 1 unit of currency. Periodically, the teacher will say stop. A bell or other device may be needed to attract attention and call out a name of one of the products. Students with that product must then put all their products in a basket at the front of the room. The remaining students continue shopping. Students who had to hand in their products must begin again, with fewer units of currency. The student with the most products at the end wins. Students then switch roles. 4. What's the question? Type of activity, listening and speaking. Object of the game, review question forms previously studied in class. Form 2 teams, 3 will work, but 2 seems to add just the right amount of competitive tension. Explain the game, with a few examples of answers in search of questions. Ask what's the question, and get students to correctly say the corresponding questions for your answer. Then the teacher has 2 players, 1 from each team, come to the front. It can be styled like a game show, with the students standing side by side. Next, the teacher reads an answer to a question and says, "What's the question?" The fastest player to respond wins a point for her or his team. New contestants come to the front for a new round. This game forces the students to think backwards a little, so they must provide a grammatically perfect question. All too often, pupils are used to answering rather than asking questions, so this is challenging and useful as review. 5. Toilet paper icebreaker. This activity should be used as a getting-to-know-you icebreaker on the first day of class. The teacher takes the toilet paper roll and takes several squares of toilet paper, then hands the roll of toilet paper to a student. The teacher tells the student to take some, more than 3. After everybody in the class has some paper, we count the squares we have, and then we have to tell that many things about ourselves in English. 6. Crazy story. Level, stages 5 and 6 of primary education. This is an activity that will make students speak in class and be creative. The students are asked to write a word on a piece of paper and told not to show anyone. This word should be a verb, or whatever the teacher would like to review. The teacher starts telling a story, then stops and chooses a student. That student will continue the story and must use his/her word. This student then chooses the next student to continue the story. The last student must end the story. After the story is over, the students try to guess what words each student has written on his/her paper. The student who guesses the most words wins the game. 7. Taboo. Level, medium to difficult. This game is a simplified version of the board game Taboo. Before class, create several index cards. On each card, write 1 word in a large font with a circle around it, and underneath write 2 to 4 related words in a smaller font. The goal is for students to get their teammates to guess the circled word. They can say anything they like to try to make them guess, except for the words written on the card. The class is divided into groups of 2, and each group is written on the board to keep track of points. A desk is placed in the front of the room facing the class, so that someone sitting at it has his/her back to the board and cannot read it. Another desk is placed in front of it, so the teammates are facing each other. The teacher picks a team to go first and has them choose a card. The teammates must decide who will guess and who will talk. The guesser sits with his/her back to the board. On the board, making sure the guesser cannot see, is the circled word as well as the other taboo words. The talker then has to try to make his/her partner guess the circled word without saying it, or any of the other words. After they guess it, another group comes up. When all the groups have gone, it can be played again and the teammates switch roles. Using competition games for students shows that games stimulate communicative skills. Students feel less afraid of using their English during the game. Besides, pupils are more willing to ask questions and think creatively about how to use English to achieve the goal. Competition gives students a natural opportunity to work together and communicate using English with each other. Furthermore, by integrating playing and learning, students practice the learned linguistic knowledge in a vivid and meaningful context. Many students understand that they can successfully use English to accomplish a variety of tasks. And finally, games in general stimulate pupils' interest in foreign culture. As Uberman 1998 states, games encourage, entertain, teach, and promote fluency in communicative skills. If not for any of these reasons, they should be used just because they help students see beauty in a foreign language and not just problems that at times seem overwhelming. The Common European Framework of Reference, the CEFR, published by the Council of Europe, recommends methodological guidelines for different levels of foreign languages teaching in order to develop communicative competence in a fun and motivating way. As we have already mentioned, games can be implemented to introduce or reinforce learning material in the classroom. Games tend to relax the classroom atmosphere, as all students are exposed to a fun way of learning. Games are a lively way of maintaining student interest in the language. They are fun, but also part of the learning process, and students should be encouraged to take them seriously. In general, they need not be compulsory. Students may prefer to do something else while another group plays a game. As with all group work, the success of the game depends on the clear instruction to the students. They must understand the aim of the game and the rules before they start. Initially, these are probably best explained in the mother tongue. The best number of students for a game is probably 4, 6 maximum, otherwise the game will move too slowly and the others will get bored while waiting for their turn. While they are playing, the teacher should be monitoring and guiding. 10 to 15 minutes is probably enough for most of the games. 1. Functions of games and creativity in foreign language learning. There are many advantages of using games in the classroom. 1. Games are a welcome break from the usual routine of the language class. 2. They are motivating and challenging. 3. Learning a language requires a great deal of effort. Games help students to make and sustain the effort of learning. 4. Games provide language practice in the various skills speaking, writing, listening, and reading. 5. They encourage students to interact and communicate. 6. They create a meaningful context for language use. It has been argued that games are not just time-filling activities, but have a great educational value. Most language games make learners use the language instead of thinking about learning the correct forms. Games can lower anxiety, thus make the acquisition of input easy. They are highly motivating and entertaining, and they can give shy students more opportunity to express their opinions and feelings and add diversion to the regular classroom activities. In the easy, relaxed atmosphere which is created by using games, students remember things faster and better, and they are a good way of practicing language, for they provide a model of what learners will use the language for in real life in the future. Games encourage, entertain, teach, and promote fluency. 2. Definition and classification of games for language learning and perfection. There are a great number of language games. It is necessary to decide which game to use in a particular class, and which games will be most appropriate and most successful with each group of students. The main reason why games are considered effective learning aids is that they increase motivation, and students get absorbed in the competitive aspects of the games. Moreover, as Avedon states, they try harder at games than in other tasks. Naturally, when playing games, students are trying to win or to beat other teams for themselves or on the behalf of their team. They are so competitive while playing because they want to have a turn to play, to score points and to win. In the class, students will definitely participate in the activities. Therefore, it is possible for a teacher to make students practice new grammar, vocabulary, and so on. It can be clearly seen that games can capture students' attention and participation. They can motivate students to want to learn more. Moreover, by using games, a boring class can be transformed into a challenging one. The following classification is mainly based on publications by Andrew Wright. Among all the games he proposes in his publications, we have only chosen those types which seem to be more appropriate for primary education. Icebreakers and warmers. Mainly speaking. Mainly listening. Mainly writing. Mainly reading. Mainly vocabulary and spelling. Mainly grammar. 3. Games as a creative and recreational technique to achieve communicative competence in the foreign language. The benefits of using games in language learning can be summed up as in the following. Games are learner-centered. Promote communicative competence. Create a meaningful context for language use. Increase learning motivation. Reduce learning anxiety. Encourage creative and spontaneous use of language. Construct a cooperative learning environment, and foster participatory attitudes of the students. At primary level, games can be used, among others, to practice the following communicative functions. Stating facts. Stating opinions and feelings. Asking questions. Conclusion. Main ideas.